Our Bible verses today are from Genesis 29. Then Laban said to Jacob, "Because you are my kinsman, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what should your wages be?" Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were lovely, and Rachel was graceful and beautiful. Jacob loved Rachel, so he said, "I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel." And Laban said, "It is better that I give her to you than I should give her to any other man. Stay with me." So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him to be just a few days because of the love he had for her. Then Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife that I may go to her, for my time is completed." So Laban gathered together all the people of the place and made a feast. But in the evening he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and he went to her. Laban gave his maid Zilpah to his daughter Leah to be her maid. Then morning came, it was Leah, and Jacob said to Laban, "What is this you have done to me? Did I not serve with you for Rachel? Why then have you deceived me?" Laban said. "This is not done in our country, giving the younger before the firstborn. Complete the week of this one, and we will give you the other also in return for serving me another 7 years." Jacob did so, and completed her week. And then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel as a wife. And Laban gave his maid Bilhah to his daughter Rachel to be her maid. So Jacob went in to Rachel and said also, and he loved Rachel more than Leah, and he served Laban for another 7 years. The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
If you were here last week, you will remember that we've already met Jacob. Jacob was the son of Isaac and Rebekah. And if you remember last week, you will also remember that Jacob and Rebekah teamed up together to fool blind old Isaac. Jacob had a twin brother who was older by a few minutes. And the older child in those days was the one who would receive a blessing on the father's deathbed. And so Isaac had called his older son Esau and said, "Okay, kid, let's see what you got. Go out and find something to hunt, and then bring me something to eat." And Rebekah overheard this. And so Rebekah and Jacob had teamed up together to fool Isaac because he was blind. And so Rebekah fixed a couple of goats out of the herd, and then she took the skin of the goats and put it on Jacob, because Esau was a hairy man, but Jacob was very smooth in more ways than one, as it turns out. So she put the goat skin on Jacob, and then she put some of Esau's clothes on Jacob, because as it turned out, Esau did not do his laundry as often as Jacob did, and he had a peculiar smell to him. So Jacob had gone in and said, "Here I am, my father." And now Isaac was blind, but he wasn't deaf. He said, "That doesn't sound like Esau. Come here, my son." So he touched Jacob, and well, he was hairy, and he smelled, and well, he smelled like Esau. And so sure enough, here was Isaac blessing the younger brother instead of the older brother. Now, if Genesis were a movie, we would think this is a great ending that we read today, because now Jacob is getting back some of his own. The first thing you need to know is that Laban, the father of Rachel and Leah, Laban was Rebekah's brother. And it turns out that the scheming gene ran true in the family. Rebekah turned out to be a schemer. She and Jacob together fooled Isaac. And now here's Laban. This is Uncle Laban, by the way. And now if you're beginning to think, wait a second, if this is Uncle Laban, that means that Rachel and Leah are Jacob's first cousins, and they're getting married. There's the ooh factor in this story. Now the ooh factor comes fairly naturally. You remember last week we read Esau had married a couple of Hittite women. and Hittite women were not good enough. Hittite were those people over there. And so this underlying institutional racism continues right on through this story too, because Rebecca had not wanted Jacob to marry a Hittite woman, so she said, you need to go back to the old country and find a nice girl there. And so the nice girls were his first cousins. Now, if you're a racist and you're trying to achieve blood purity, then the only way that's going to happen is eventually you're going to marry a cousin. Racism is really dumb because they haven't fought this all the way through. So that's the ooh factor in this. Oh, yuck. On the other hand, here's this nice bit of trickery. You know, Jacob's name actually means grabby. Jacob came out of the womb and he was holding on to his brother's heel. Jacob means grabby. Technically means one who supplants, but it means grabby. And here Jacob had grabbed the older brother's blessing and then had run away. And now he's getting back some of his own because Uncle Laban is as tricky as his sister Rebecca. So he says, sure, I'll give you the younger daughter. All you have to do is work for 7 years. And what the Bible says is that Laban threw a feast. Now, what happens next is probably at this feast, Uncle Laban plied Jacob with wine, and maybe something a little stronger than wine. So that when the time came, the next morning, not only was it not the girl he thought he had married, but he probably had a king-size headache. It was a bad day as far as Jacob was concerned. But you and I watching this in a movie go, yeah, you deserve what you got, mister. Ew. In Bible study on Wednesday, we were working through all these characters, working through all of this. And this is an ooh story on so many levels. There's the racism that ends up, you know, with cousins marrying each other. There's the sexism, because basically Rachel and Leah are used as sex slaves through this whole nonsense. And then there's this whole business of not being honest within the family. Now, if you want 3 strikes, you're out. There it is. And so we're talking about what all this means. And finally somebody in the Bible study said, why are these people in the Bible? Which is a fair question. Why are these people in the Bible? Last week we were dealing with what to do at the death. What do you do with stuff at the death? Now we're dealing with the honesty of a family, or not. And I'm very much afraid, friends, it's only going to get worse. If you keep reading the rest of this chapter, and the next chapter, and the chapter after that, Jacob's life does not get any simpler, having 2 wives. Why are these people in the Bible? You know, television did not invent the soap opera, the Bible did. Ellery Queen did not invent the murder mystery, the Bible did. Major networks didn't even invent the news, the Bible did. The Bible tells the story of those kinds of people because that's the only kind there is. The only kind of people that there are in the world are the people who don't get along with their families and people who can't decide what to do when the time of death comes. The only kinds of people there are in the world are those who have institutional racism under them somewhere and those who do not respect one another for their gender. That's the only kind of person there is. And there are some of us who work very hard. Oh no, we're not part of that crowd that's demonstrating and waving some Nazi flag. We're better than that. And we come to church and we expect everybody around us to be better than that too. But when we read the Bible and we say, what are those people doing in the Bible? The reality is, that's us. That's us. Because somewhere along the line, we've gathered those sins into our world too. We have gathered the sin of being greedy. We've gathered the sin of being grabby. We gather the sin of not being truthful with our families. And so when we say, what are those people doing in the Bible? The reality is that's us in the Bible. The Bible is telling us our story. Now, I don't know if you noticed it while Diane was reading, but in the 29th chapter of Genesis, God doesn't even show up until the 31st verse. Diane stopped at verse 30. The next verse is the first time that God appears in this terrible little story, because it says, and God saw that Leah was unloved. God saw that Leah was unloved. Not only is Jacob dumb, but he's choosing favorites. And it's not going to stop at the wives, by the way. He's going to do it with the kids, too, the next generation. But when God enters the story, God saw that Leah was unloved. And the reality of our world, friends, is that God always sees the ones who are unloved. God always sees the underdogs. God always sees the unwelcomed. God always sees those who are pushed to one side. God always sees the ones who are out of luck. And those are the ones that God intervenes for. What are those people doing in the Bible? Well, they're us. That's our story in the Bible. And when you and I claim to be the people of faith, those who follow God manifested in Jesus Christ, then we take up the side of the underdog as well. We take up the side of the underdog. We take up the side of those who have no clothes, and so we offer clothes at 25 cents each. We take up the side of those who have no food, and so once a month we distribute food. We take up the side of those who are unloved, because that's whose side God is on. And when we talk about God made manifest in Jesus Christ, we know that's who Jesus is cheering for too. It's really a fair question. What are those people doing in the Bible? How ooh can you get? About as ooh as we are. Because the Bible's story is our story. And God, who is made manifest in Jesus Christ, comes to us because he loves the underdog. He loves the unlovely, and he loves the unloved. And that's us too. Ooh, what are those people doing in the Bible? Well, they're making sure that we know we're in the Bible too. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.